Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts Radio. I have an amazing story to tell you about a guy born in 1888 who developed a machine that could destroy the microbes responsible for pretty much every single illness that we claim in the modern world. And what's funny about it is that it mirrors what I've been telling you guys about what the dude said in Egypt about how the temples weren't temples, but they were actually hospitals. And that they used electricity from the plateau to vibrate a quartz bed to cure people with the frequencies by annihilating certain little tiny microbes inside the human body. This is going to shake up any theories you've ever heard about modern medicine, what a virus is, and what a microbe is. The gentleman's name is Royal Raymond Rife. He's born in May of 1888. By 1931, he had done something incredible. And then he took it to the next level. So what Rife is what we call him, R-I-F-E. Rife was driven by a need to see things at a microscopic level. That was the genesis of this entire journey. And obviously he didn't have anything off shelf like an electron microscope or what have you. And he had one requirement. Unlike an electron microscope, which just takes still pictures of everything, Rife wanted to see a movie. He knew that he needed to see how things behaved inside the human body physically to understand their relationship with all the mass around them. And he ends up creating this amazing looking microscope that achieved 50,000 power by 1931. There's rumors that it went way over that as well. I mean, there's different levels of documentation. But he was an optics genius. And he starts to see things inside the human body. And he filmed it. What did he discover? He discovered something very interesting and very sort of thematic with the show as of the summer of 2022, right? He saw biological infinity. He saw what was classified as a 1-micron sort of order of beings, which we call bacteria in the human body. But as he kept punching down into the bowels of each one of these entities, he said, every time I thought I found the base component of life, I would zoom into its guts, and there'd be a whole other civilization of other beings inside that. And then he keeps going inside that, and every time he went down an order of magnitude, down to absolutely sub-micron stuff, which is where you get what we classify today as viruses. It was always the same thing. Some sort of what looks like a multi-cell being, except these things are below the actual atomic structure of a cell. They're made of crystalline proteins. Interesting, right? So the way he ended up financing himself at the very, very beginning is he had met a woman named Amelia Bridges. Amelia Bridges was a Timken. Timken was an extremely wealthy family. He explained to her what he was trying to do, and she rounded up at least her brother and some family's members and started furnishing him with pretty much infinite cash to build whatever he needed to build. At the same time, this guy is a machining genius. In terms of using lathes and getting things built and having maybe a component built by somebody else and a little optic through a chain of optics. And there's more people that I have talked to that have done this kind of thing in real life. But it was, 10 years in the past or 20 years in the past that you can compound optics and trap light such that you can get these results at really high levels. I don't think they were anywhere near this particular endeavor. But he built them by hand. They called him the master tool maker because he made such precise units. And I'll show you pictures of this if you're coming in through your iPod. But now imagine that not only could Rife isolate what was being categorized as a virus, right? Which is something much, much smaller than a biological entity. He actually watched it move around the body. And what he realized was, instead of us, talking about everything in nucleic acid chains, this RNA crap, he's like, they're little bugs. They're little bugs that either eat away at your cellular tissue or infiltrate the cell itself and eat it from the inside. But they shouldn't be there. So that was stage one of his discovery. Now, with a lot of what was going on at the time, they used to use stains. They would stain a particular petri dish, and then the biological matter would eat up the stain, and they could inject it in various conditions and then watch where that particular color went. Red would go one way, blue would go the other way. Well, he realized right away that by creating this optic that could see things way smaller than 1 micron, he needed a way to classify them to see, okay, which ones are different than others. And lo and behold, when he used monochromatic light, all of a sudden, they started shining their own spectrum. So just like oil, when you drop it in water and you see it in the little puddles outside your house, this family, this group of sub-micron beings that, again, he said, I stopped at one point, but they seem to go all the way down. He said, I question, where infinity stops in the human genome. Genome just being a metaphor for what we're made out of, right? Not the actual genome. But he starts looking around and he starts finding things, and he starts realizing patients with a certain disease have a certain microbe in them that's more active than others, and then he classified them by their color. And he said that also, by using this particular monochromatic light, that he never got a bounce back of light into the optic such that two objects might confuse the light through the waves of light coming through and diffusing. So the way that he was applying the light kept everything very distinct. And the other beautiful thing was he got contrast. He got contrast in the entities that he was looking at. And why is that important? And what is contrast? That is something that is, it's the measurement of something that's very bright and something that's very dark. The difference between the two is your contrast. Forget color. It's a black and white term. By getting these negatives, basically this optic to come through his microscope, and having black and white, he was able to see the contour of the bacteria. Again, they call them viruses when they get really small. It's like the difference between a pig and a hog, right? So you have big giant hogs and little tiny pigs, right? Same creature. But a color equaled a specific family of the virus order of bacteria. So he finally gets to the point where he perfects this telescope and he gives it a name, calling it the Universal Telescope. Pretty cool. Very, very complex, and it takes a lot of time to set it up and operate it. His claims were that he was working, when he worked on average 18 to 20-hour days to get any one particular result. Now, throughout this entire explanation of this Royal Rife gentleman, you need to understand that every application of any instrument that this gentleman used most likely needed a three-dimensional understanding of the problem he is trying to solve. So as we get to his device that started helping people's health, there's more to it than just the basics of turn this machine on, point it at yourself, and you're healthy. But the same thing goes for operating the telescope as well. So now he's able to see these things, and an idea occurs to him. What if I could pulse an electromagnetic wave at these little invaders, that it resonates at their normal frequency, and I could rupture, if not completely explode them inside the human body without hurting the human tissue? Meaning, I vibrate at something completely different than these little tiny microbes. They don't need much. I would need a lot to vibrate and explode because I have a lot of atomic forces holding me together. Equal currents, right? Well, he's able to do it one time, And as soon as he's able to do this one time, he's like, oh my gosh, I've got a technique now for finding and isolating a little tiny microbe that is causing an illness in a person, finding out where it's localized in the human host, if not the entire host, and I can treat them twice a week, allow the body to absorb the biomatter that comes out of this and maybe join it to the immune system, and I can cure people of these things for that particular instance of having it, right? Cures are kind of impossible, right? A cure, the concept of a cure is that you've given someone the machine that can always stop something from happening. Shy of that mechanism, where it can never, ever, ever overwhelm the host, you have just simply treated that particular issue. It's like when we gain weight. You're not cured from being overweight. Just because you lose weight, go to the gym, and you look amazing. Because you know you can go back out and eat horrible food, get sick, break your legs, and you can't move around that much, and you gain a little weight. Okay. So we can't cure ourselves of things most of the time. So he's got a funny quote I'll tell you in a little bit about the word cure. But he figured out harmonic resonance. And that's, again, I keep talking about this. This is the example where the old bridges used to twist and turn back in the day, and then they flop into the water because we forgot to build bridges at a higher frequency than natural wind. And when something's caught, and most of you have been in a car in your lifetime where a particular piece of metal or plastic or something on the outside of the car hits its little thing, and bam, that thing just starts vibrating to the point it shatters, blows away. But for any of you, if you added a little item to the outside of your car, some little toy or something for a brief moment, and you'll be driving, and all of a sudden you can hear it. I had to replace an antenna from one of my old cars. And I didn't realize it, but just getting to 60 miles an hour, that antenna back there started vibrating so bad that it made me feel like I had a flat tire because it was going ba 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 ba. It was just flipping in the wind. Okay. So he uses this technique, again, to blast out the crystalline protein structures of these beings. He called it the moral oscillatory rate. This table he built for all the things he could find. Right away, he found tuberculosis, he found gonorrhea, a bunch of venereal diseases, and then he found typhoid. And he's very soon about to collaborate with a gentleman looking for polio. So in the midst of all this victory in a private setting, he knows he's got to create some sort of corporation to try and help this process grow. Plus, his machine is gigantic. And to sell it would be really tough because it's about the size of a wall computer. Because again, in 1931, you don't have people creating the miniaturization just yet. Radio is going to help it out in the next 10 years in a significant way. He said, look, there's no magic weapon to this whole thing. He goes, I hunted and I tried until I found the frequency that would make a particular thing he found pop. But then he finds out something more interesting than you could possibly imagine with this thing. Blew my mind when I heard about this. What he figured out was, and brace for this. This is amazing, and this I want you to think about, and I want you to think about all the stuff that you may have picked up over the years. He said that the little microbes that he discovered, if given a different regimen of food, would spawn different children. A whole collection, which he called the group, of these little completely different things, from a fungi to other little microbes. And that doesn't make sense. Let me give you the analogy of this so it blows your mind properly. Let's just say either you're pregnant or your wife's pregnant. Sorry, that's the way it works, guys. And you feed her primarily vegetables the entire time. And she always has a kitten. And then you feed her meat the whole time. And she always has a dog. And then you feed her apple pie. And maybe she has a human. And then she has a vacuum cleaner. And then she has this. You take this same exact microbe that he discovered, this sort of kind of alpha, kind of stem cell little microbe, and you feed it a particular regimen, it will spawn different materials that then cause different problems in the body. And let me blow your mind even further. If you take the children that come out of this thing and you feed them different regimens, they can spawn exactly what their parent was, getting back up to the one that can spawn everything. Nuts, man. Absolutely crazy. So a guy named Kendall, Dr. Kendall, or Kendall, he came up with something that he called the K medium. Now, the way this works is that they actually have like a test tube type chamber. It could be anything, but let's just use test tube. And they use a filtering mechanism, like a stone, that is porous, a different permeability. That's how they track it. And they mix up this batch of bacteria and they stick it in the top. Well, they know that through the chambers of the stone, the only thing that can get through the stone are really microscopic, teeny tiny sub-micron things. And so it would pour through the bottom, and they'd find other culturable things in the bottom of this thing. What's weird about it is the stuff they found down below wasn't in the top stuff because it could be in the guts of the material that's being poured in. And so it confused a lot of folks of like, where the hell is this stuff coming from? There are all these rumors that things were being, synthesized, or someone's trying to, confuse someone. So now he's got this thing occurring in what's called vitro paradigm. In a petri dish, under his microscope, he's able to hit this thing with the frequency and shatter it. He's got videos of it, videos of this. It's amazing, right? But he's got to get to something called vivo. Vivo is the same exact practice, but using a human host or an animal host, you could say, any type of living host, where the actual microbes are inside the living host. Now, when you're doing vitro, you can send the beam straight in with just a normal oscillator of some sort, and it's just raw waves hitting the petri dish, and it works well. Unfortunately, due to diffusion and the epidermis of the human body and all the muscle tissue, when you use that particular wave technique towards the human body, it gets absorbed and canceled out. So the way to get it to go deep inside the body is to use a gas. So you create a medium that's going to be absorbed into the human body, and you create the pulse through the gas, and that was giving Rife the results that he wanted. And again, remember, none of this affects the human body. It's not at the right mortal oscillatory rate to hurt the human body. You're way tougher than these little guys. The other thing was that this guy was actually working with geniuses. And one of them was Steinmetz, the guy I keep talking about, the mathematician that boiled down a bunch of physics. But there's Rosnow, Kendall, Milbank Johnson. He's going to come back into the game. Lee DeForest. These are all doctors. Lee DeForest was the guy that invented the frickin' vacuum tube. Okay, so he was celebrated by a ton of people that were, no bones kind of guys. They actually pushed through the scientific community, got their technology or discoveries actually accepted by humanity. It's huge. So now I told you about this methodology of feeding some of these, key microbes that they discovered a different diet, and it would turn into different things. And I mean completely structurally different things. And so they needed to come up with a terminology for this form of science so they could have a dialogue about it. And they came up with something called the pleomorph, or pleomorphing. Pleo equals more than. Morphing is obviously structure from. Okay, I had looked that up, but I mean, we know morphing from a lot of different other terminologies that are out there. So pleomorphing is this technique, the result of feeding any one of these things a specific diet. It has more than one form, and it changes its structure from what it was. So then we have off to the side a little piece of history that's going to be very interesting. It's very similar to the relationship between Tesla and Einstein. Tesla coming, standing on all the shoulders of all the giants that formed all the base components that we use for electronics, and then Einstein, who invented jack shit and claimed everything. Now, Rife is getting really good at this, finding something and killing it. If he can find it, he can kill it. No problem. Might take him a little while to find the exact frequency, but he's having a problem finding cancer, finding the microbe that causes this cancer. So because this Kendall guy, Kendall, because he had created this better filtration system that more accurately took that initial biological product, filtered it down through the stone, and could give you what you wanted at the bottom. And because he had mastered this K medium, which is what he called it, which is the food regimen to either restrict a certain food supply from what they found at the bottom or give it something new to create one of these several things that it could create, this pleomorphic table of things, he started collaborating with Rife to find the cancer cell. He finally found it. And I believe I'm saying it right when I say Bacillus typhosus. This was a purple-red spectrum when they hit it with a monochromatic light. Obviously, very quickly, they found the frequency to kill it. And then they had a dinner, which was probably a giant error on their part. And this is where the innocence of the era was getting in the way of progress. They brought together some of the most celebrated scientists of the time, doctors, what have you, everyone in this type of research, and they announced the end of cancer. Well, you know, there's a lot of guys out there involved in a lot of stuff that probably could be making millions and millions of dollars if this ever got halted. And so they're not going to let this guy, or these two guys, progress. But they have to, take their time. This is all in a laboratory. They're not doing it to humans just yet. But he found out that with using his machine at 900,000 cycles, this Bacillus stuff just blew up. Now, if you had a lot of this in your body, you're going to have to do it quite a bit, but the results are going to be quite astounding. We get a few traders that come into the mix. A Dr. Thomas Rivers from the Rockefeller Foundation. A guy named Hans Zinser, Zinnser, at the Johns Hopkins University of Baltimore, New York. They said that this filtration system that Kendall created was all bullshit and that it was simply allowing too much to go through the stone and it's all flawed, just attacking the credibility of the whole thing. Well, again, when you hear something that's bigger than life, you have an instinct to believe someone telling you that amazing thing is actually bunk. Because if I were to tell you, look, I'm a time traveler and I'm actually from another planet, that's two concepts that would be way beyond your ability to believe. And so if I don't show you, or if I say, well, I could show you, but you'd have to be right here with me, but I can't show you because you're coming through a recording that happened a long time ago. And someone says, that guy's, completely full of crap. You have this anomaly in your head you can't resolve. Well, I want to be there and have him prove all this stuff to me, but I can't. So this person telling me that it's bunk, well, that just makes me relax and I throw it out. The anomaly goes away. And that's what they know. It's brilliant. But by Rivers going out, this Dr. Thomas Rivers going out and telling the medical community that these other two guys are completely full of it, what he did was he issued a passive threat at everybody else. You step out of line, you might have financing problems. You might have job problems. If there's any regulatory organization that develops over your head, maybe they don't like what you're doing. Maybe they don't like your face, right? And we see this all the time with the bullshit, global warming stuff. Rosenow, Rosenow, well, he was looking for polio. But he wasn't using any of this technology to do it. So here comes Rife, and he's like, man, you're not looking in the right place, and you don't understand this pleomorphism stuff that's going to probably be responsible. You probably have a unique little microbe that's doing this to the human body. We just need to find it, shatter it, and then write that into the book. Put that into my machine so I can set it properly, and we can do what we need to do. As soon as, July 13th, 1932, Rosenow published within the Mayo Clinic of Rochester, New York, that he had figured out how to do this, and 2 weeks later he was fired. You think these guys are out to save you when you go to a hospital? Are you fucking kidding me? Now, you got a broken arm and that kind of shit, a bullet hole in you. Yeah, sure. But you want to go in for any of the stuff that's been going on the last couple of years? Give me a break. And they figured out how to double blind it with pancake waitresses giving you regimens to kill you. So Rife, at this point, says something very interesting. He says, 9/10 of the criticism is a cloak of ignorance. I think that's fantastic. The word virus actually means, in Latin, poison. And remember, take a bacteria. It's usually about 1 micron or bigger. You go below that, and you start getting into germ theory. But instead of it being an external germ that goes inside the body, it's actually a different classification of the same type of organism at the 1 micron level, except a sub-micron. And they have this pleomorphism capability based on the regimen of what you eat, right? You're either starving yourself of something or giving yourself something that will spawn various modifications of this thing from a single host. It's amazing. I mean, imagine that. A human being, well, let's make it a little easier. The cow, the female cow, and say she's one of these pleomorphic beings. You feed her one thing, she has a human. Feed another thing, she has a pig. Feed another thing, she has a cat. It's amazing. And then you can take the cat, feed it something, and it births a little human or a cow. Insane. If you're wondering about how that might work, and you're like, man, that just sounds nuts. The K media that this guy Kendall created, I think probably works something like this. When you are so teeny tiny and you're based on a crystalline protein structure, and it's like we are too, but our crystalline protein structure is way deep inside of what we are as the higher order construct of humanity, right? But when you're that tiny, when you're nano, meters big, what you eat could change the way that you actually form. You've seen a squirrel stuff a bunch of crap in his cheeks, right? And his cheeks get this big. Well, imagine that actually causing the squirrel to change his face. His face automatically gets that big and just stays that big. And if you deplete him of the materials that make him big, he gets smaller again. And he stays small. He changes into something else. I hope that makes sense. Now, there's something called Koch's postulate, and it's Koch like the Koch brothers, Koch. This is a very basic protocol, which means a set of things you got to do to get this outcome. What you do is you've got to find cancer in a host, like say a rat. Then you must extract that out, isolate it, culture it, and then you insert it into a different animal, and it recreates the same cancer. And that shows sort of a cause and effect model and the fact that it can go from one host to another. But most of the time, they'd start with a human host that has a biopsy of a malignant tumor. Then they pull it out, they culture it, they insert it into a compatible being, which again, we use lab rats. They grow a giant tumor, and then we're like, okay, this is the cause of the tumor that's in the human. If you pulled out the wrong thing, you culture it, stick it in the rat, and it doesn't get cancer, well, then you fail Koch's postulate. So this is something that led to isolating the purple-red microbe that Rife and Kendall started obliterating with 900,000 K of its, or 900,000 frequency of their machine, right? It's not just anything, it's what their machine actually output. Now, Rife went ahead and created his own protocol using the K media from Kendall. He had something he called the BX virus, the B-wide virus, and then he has two other ones. Well, these are hard to say. It looks like a monococcoid, monococcoid. And then the final one, which is absolutely insane, it's the Cryptomyces pleomorphic fungi. He says those two are the ones that grow into a cancer-causing purple-red spectrum. But again, treating those bottom two can get it all the way back up to the BX formula that he had found. Okay. So, again, this germ theory is the infection model of getting sick. His theory, this pleomorphic theory, which he proved, was a transformational reason why you get sick. And a lot of you people, monitoring 5G, for instance, you're worried, very rightfully so, that this technology can be used to distribute illnesses around the world. You want to make influenza happen, you just create this little situation. Again, you don't have the K medium, so it may need more things. You may need to ingest certain things. So you ingest a bunch of crappy GMOs from your local shitty grocery store, and then they hit you with that frequency, and it either supplies the food supply to these microbes to make it go one way, or it may block some sort of food supply to the microbe that would make it go another way. You get sick in the end. Now, before this is over, you're going to find out how to stay healthy, at least via their claims, right? When they killed one of these things, they called it devitalizing. I think that's really cool. It killed the components which were vital to keep it alive. How do you stay healthy? Real simple. We're not going to hide it. You have to keep your pH balance natural. What is the frequency of true human natural pH? 7.0. That is the alkaline level that you want to hit at all times. Smart water is negative because it makes that smooth flavor that you get when you drink smart water. Smart water is nothing more than the water that they are put in Coca-Cola to give it that smoother taste as all that carbonization and sugar hits you. Feels good, but it's literally putting your state being out of alkaline. What's some fast ways to get alkaline? Lemon juice, apparently, as soon as it hits the palate, you got to be careful with it hitting your teeth directly because it can actually take the enamel off your teeth. But as long as you just ingest some sort of water with lemon, it will, where it exists, will distribute as much alkaline as possible. 7.0 is all you need, and that's all you want. By 1934, Rife had created this machine that could, through vivo techniques, using this gas-propelled frequency, kill cancer. These little microbes that are responsible for making other cellular tissue malignant. So, it's time to prove this in the medical industry, at least among his partners in crime that are going to be supporting him in the medical industry. And of course, you want to have a lot of people campaigning for you in the medical industry as you start announcing this stuff, because you know there's going to be problems. So they picked out 16 patients for him to cure. What Rife said was, as soon as these patients started arriving, he goes, these people were, he goes, of course they gave me patients that are arriving in ambulances, meaning super critical cancer patients. Now to cut to the chase, immediately he cures 14 of them. It took 3 extra weeks to cure the other 2. All 16 cured. One gentleman who watched this occur said that a patient came in, this is another doctor talking about this, came in and saw a guy with a big giant tumor in his gut. Hard as a rock, all tumorous. He said, man, there's just no way this is going to work. Now, what Rife and company did was they actually treated patients, half the patients every single day, and the other patients 2 times a week. He said that the ones that were treated 2 times a week healed a lot faster than the ones that were getting it every single day. And of course, at some point, they reduced the protocol on the other on the other batch, and they got them all healed up. What he said was that by spacing out the treatment, he said, look, as soon as we annihilate these bacillus group little microbes, that it actually releases so much of its kind of base material into the immune system that it gives the immune system, especially the lymph node system, which actually is a filtering mechanism. The lymphatic system is a closed system in your spine, and it gathers up and filters things. But the lymph node system, remember I told you about the stone that's filtering out the mechanism of, big microbes into little tiny subatomic microbes. Your lymph nodes do exactly that. That's what their job is. And so overwhelming it with a daily regimen had less of an effect, but allowing days to go by. I mean, think about it. In 7 days, you get 2 treatments and you're healed. This guy said, I was utterly blown away that this guy got cured. How long did he operate his ray? Now, again, this is not something you could build unless you knew exactly how he built his units. So be very careful with, dreams of becoming this Rife guy and just building a thing that hits you with frequencies. Well, what kind of frequencies? Sound frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies? None of this works unless you completely copy what he did. But through his machine, at the time, the configuration of the machine that he had built to do these tests, it was 3 minutes per session. 3 minutes, twice a week, 6 minutes of treatment, twice a week. Cured 16 out of 16 people for their current infection of cancer-causing microbes. Well, at this point, they sort of have the results, the scientific results that they need to start applying for the legal right to use this in all clinics around the world. Right away, they are absolutely buried in red tape. The cancer research at the time, in 1934-35, Rife in an interview said that he was aware that the organizations that claimed to be trying to have a war on cancer, right, had raised, this is in the mid-30s, this is during the Depression, people, that they had raised over $127 million to fight cancer, but only had invested $50,000. $50,000. That is a 0.04% investment of the money raised. So where's the money going to? Exactly to the old bastards that went to the dinner that said there was going to be an end to this thing once and for all. It's just laundered into people's pockets. Oh, I paid this guy as a consultant. I paid this guy. We rented this building. We did this. We bought a paperclip for $20,000. I'm going to warn you, that's exactly what's happening today. Except maybe they spend it more efficiently in front of you on things that'll never yield what we're trying to yield, right? So at this point, Rife has figured out that, okay, I got this cool machine. I finally figured out what I need to build to do this thing in the first place. So that part is isolated. He's got his oscillators. He's got his gas emitter that's going to make this thing happen. But he's like, it's as big as a wall. Okay, so I need to get this thing smaller. So he's introduced to a guy named Philip Hoyland. Hoyland. Philip is an engineer. He was able to get this entire, because of the advancements in electronics since Rife had kind of put this thing together, he was able to get this thing bigger than this humidor array, probably 2 humidors over, okay? He was able to get it down to the size of a little tiny suitcase, probably about 18 inches by 10 inches by 8 inches. Little tiny thing. That's cool. So now they're like, okay, Hoyland goes, I need to make sure that I'm, financially compensated for this innovation because I think I can take this thing a lot further than you've taken it. So they formed the Ray Beam Corporation. Beam Rays Corporation, excuse me. Now, in order to form a corporation, you really need some big players in your corporation. This is where you can get bid every single time. They pull on this gentleman named Benjamin T. Cullen as the president. Rife is pulled on as the founder. Hoyland is pulled on as the engineer. And a guy named C.R. Hutchinson as the business manager. Now, this Hutchinson guy is going to be a bad proxy, but so is Hoyland. He's going to get bad too. So Hutchinson, in order to sort of raise money for the company, they all formed the company with 6,000 shares apiece. From interviews that I heard from this Cullen guy, Cullen, he said in his own voice, he goes, I fronted all the money for this entire thing. I'm bringing that money, they're bringing the invention, and this other guy's going to help me manage it, and we'll be good. Well, the Hutchinson guy starts getting into really weird stock trades and sort of dilution techniques to try and raise money. That's going to come back in a little bit here. Now, when you make a piece of technology, everybody wants you to patent the technology because that's protection against someone else just seeing what you did, and you put all this money in, everyone just steals it from you. Unfortunately, I guess at the time they didn't have combination use patents because that's what you would file today. Unfortunately, they could not patent this machine, no matter how they came at it. So a couple of things they did was Holland is trying to say, okay, we can't have a table of frequencies on a piece of paper and then a dial on the front that tells you to dial it to the frequency, because that tells everybody this coveted table of frequencies. So what we have to do is create a dial on the front that is every single, pleomorphic frequency you want to kill. So polio would be one, typhoid would be another, cancer would be another, and et cetera, up this dial. And then Holland tries to hide the frequencies in the circuitry of the actual unit itself. Stuff is starting to get weird, and there always has to be some sort of, cause and effect model to expose the corruption, right? Well, this doctor in England who was actually taking care of King George at the time, a guy named Gonin, Gonin, Dr. Gonin, B.W. Gonin, he hears about this whole thing through the grapevine. And he's like, you know what? I would really like to have one of your microscopes, and I'd like to have two of your machines. Now, there's a bit of a debate, to split it here, that Gonin actually bought a microscope, and there's another piece of information that says he borrowed the telescope or microscope. But there's more information that he actually bought it than he borrowed it. But he cuts a check to Rife's Beam Ray Corporation for $10,000 to have two of the machines. But when he gets them to England, they're not doing what they said they would do. As a matter of fact, they're not working properly at all. When they open the back up and start looking inside, and it's all tube stuff, just like an old radio, they found out, well, certain wires weren't even connected properly. The frequencies that this machine is supposed to generate weren't being generated even after the wires are reconnected. So he's like, what the F, right? Well, that revealed that Holland was up to something. The overall consensus, and especially as a result of Holland's behavior in the near future here, that he was still pissed off, that he thought he should have, apparently, given that he was given equal shares as all the other guys, he should have more shares than everybody else because he's making the machines. Rife was basically just too trusting. Isn't that a shame? The penalty for being a good, God-fearing, common law person is that you have to get attacked by the people that can go right at your weaknesses, that you're too trusting. A friend of mine is getting a law degree, not to become an attorney, but because he wants to get in the film business and he wants to protect himself with contracts, because he knows that he's naive in that area. So there's a guy named Morris Fishbein. Fishbein as in B-E-I-N. This guy is a Royal Scumbag of the Year guy. He is sort of he probably had every social problem on planet Earth. And so he had to go to where he could go to get his notoriety that he needed. Unfortunately, he was a big player and like head editor of the AMA, the American Medicine Association, now called JAMA, Journal for American Medicine Association, right? This guy was in charge from 24 to 49. Everybody wants to be a part of this organization, the AMA. And so the AMA can basically start giving you problems if you don't go along with it. Under Fishbein, listen up. Listen up, listen up, listen up. Because what I'm about to tell you, the Fishbein did with the AMA is what every fake news organization does right now. Every magazine does this. And, like Scientific American, every one of them does this. He published a menu, Fishbein, published a menu that says, you give us this amount of money, this is what we'll do for you. A fluff piece about your product. A fake news article about how your product actually affects people positively. Now remember, around this time, smoking cigarettes is going to start becoming really popular, right? More doctors smoke Camel cigarettes, right? But he also published a little sub-menu, the little dessert at the end, which said, you give us this much money, and we'll wipe out your competition. You're going to make a drug that fixes that? Well, not only can you buy this sort of pre-certification that your stuff has the indication, hence the cure or the effect or whatever. But we'll tell everybody that your competition is like death on earth. Interesting. So that's this guy's integrity. And he's about to use his power to come after Rife and company. This is where I heard Rife say, they hate the word cure, like the devil hates holy water. So Fishbean doesn't just sit on the side. Fishbean finds a guy who lives in Chicago who was cured for that particular case that he had, right, in San Diego at a clinic using this machine that Rife had created. So he goes to Chicago. He doesn't know where the clinic was. So he goes to Chicago. And he says, I heard you got cured with this machine. Where did you go? I mean, we're fascinated. We're so excited about this. Hey, I run the AMA, man. And the dude said, oh, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Go to San Diego and you'll find this thing. So he goes to San Diego. He finds out what the company is. He takes a really good close look at the company. I don't know how he did it, but he could smell Holland a mile away. Holland wanted money. Remember? That's all he wanted. In his head, he said, just because I build the time machine, he thinks he's the guy who made it, right? So the genius who invents the time machine makes it so easy to build. It's like the B-17s back in World War II. Well, utter aeronautical geniuses designed this thing such that housewives could stop working, go in and build these things. And they built them so well, they still exist to this day. The crap we build today ain't going to be around 100 years from now. Guarantee it. So he bribes him with a $10,000 check. A $10,000 check. Holland sells out. And $10,000 during the Depression. Oh my God. Could you imagine? You have to understand that what line is it used to give away, or what's my line? Excuse me. No, what's line is it? What's My Line, which ran from 1950 to 1968, one of the most popular television shows in world history for the time. They gave away $50 if you won the whole thing. Meaning no one could guess your career, line being line of work. Well, if you do the math from about 1955, $50 was $550. Can you imagine getting 15 years earlier, $10,000? Whoa. So Fishbein figures out that Holland's all disgruntled, right? Gives him the check and says, I got this attorney. I got a bunch of attorneys that can actually facilitate you suing this Beam Ray corporation you belong to, and we'll knock out all of the actual partners, and you and I'll just run the place from this point forward. They got a Shapiro attorney, Aaron Shapiro. He gets in there, and he says they don't tell him about the lawsuit yet, as far as I understand the way the chain of events worked. Holland's like, man, I'm not sure that our books are up to snuff, how stocks have been handled are up to snuff. And so, you have to keep minutes every single year. When you have a meeting, you have to keep minutes. For every corporate meeting you have, you should be keeping minutes. It's okay. So Shapiro goes in there and says, man, you guys are really in trouble. Stock stuff that Hutchison did is completely illegal. And you're not doing too well financially, which they already knew. So by June 5th, 1939, this lawsuit starts, and it consumes basically a year of Rife's life. Now, I heard it was a year, but at the same time, I also heard in December of the same year, this thing was concluded. But what they did was all parties, Holland's group, funded by this Fishbean guy, and the rest of the partners all agreed, no jury. Just let the judge decide. Let's get this thing over with. Now, in the end, Rife wins. Holland loses. The judge is actually so sort of passionately empathetic and sympathetic to Rife, he actually offers him the ability to countersue. But the problem is, at that time, this Amelia Bridges dies in the middle of this lawsuit. And so Rife's connection to the Timken family and this infinite amount of money disappears. He can no longer screw around. He's got to get it going. He's already made his machine. The AMA is causing him problems with this lawsuit and about to cause even more problems. And Rife, although a genius, and if you can hear his voice on the internet, BitChute's got a great video on him. He seemed like a very confident man. They said, he liked to own the room when he was having a conversation about his technology, but he had a deathly fear of being on trial, of actually having to go up and testify on his own behalf. And they said that when he would go up to testify, he was sort of a different guy. He was sort of a bumbling mess, which is very atypical of his behavior. And if you listen to him talk, it's almost hard to believe that this was the case. But apparently, it so freaked him out that he started drinking. And so he starts becoming an alcoholic. As one of his closest friends said, he goes, Rife was a guy that should never, ever, ever touch alcohol. Because as soon as he touches it, he's gone for the rest of the day. But he actually, again, makes it through. Now, it's 1939. What else was going on in 1939? As Rife is trying to contemplate what he's going to do with his life, Amelia Bridges passes away. He wins the case, but in order to countersue, it's going to cost money. Countersue for what? It's not like there's a big purse at the end of the rainbow, right? Well, by the end of the year, Germany had started what was going to become World War II. This Gonen guy, for instance, is sitting over there in England going, you're supposed to fly over here and show us how to use your machine. Rife was about to go when the lawsuit started, so Rife gets grounded. He can't go anywhere legally. By the end of the year, World War II started, and because of the U-boats doing a bunch of stuff and England getting in this fight, all the shipping back and forth had Lusitania problems, right? So he can't go. Cutting off his ability to make money. Now, when Amelia died, she gave Rife $50,000, which is a ton of money back in those days, no doubt. But it's the last amount of money he's ever going to get from that camp. And his machine is about to get railroaded hardcore. He did end up testifying several times, by the way. This is where they found that other behavior. But the way that he won, by the way, was very simple. His partner said, look, all we have to do is prove in a court of law that this idea originated with you and that you gave Holland all the information on how this works and that Holland only built the machine. And they proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt, and that's how Rife won. So keep that in mind if you ever end up being Holland or Rife. So now here comes the coup de grace from Fishbein. What a scumbag this guy is, okay? He uses the AMA, and I'm sure he's being manipulated by others as well, but he loved this kind of shit, from what I could gather. He uses the AMA, and he goes to every single doctor who bought the machine that he could, minus one guy, this Johnson guy we mentioned way back at the beginning. But he went to all the doctors and said, either you get rid of this machine, or you're out of the AMA for life. And we'll publish the fact that you're out. You're going to be screwed. And they all caved. Now, at this point, Rife kind of mentioned publicly to people that he goes, look, I've been looking in these machines for over 20 years. He goes, my eyesight is starting to turn out to be crap. So my ability to continue this research is really hobbled by the fact that I can't stare down on these things anymore because I spent, again, 18 to 20-hour days over and over and over, 7 days a week. This Johnson guy, at the beginning of our story, he has one of the machines, and he keeps treating them. And he treats them, I believe, until 1944, when he dies. So he dies just before World War II is over. And 2 weeks after he dies, they come in and basically tell the clinics it's there, you got to get rid of it. Now, there's one other buddy that's still using the machine, so he negotiated a deal. He says, here's what I'm going to do. I got a bunch of patients that are currently recovering using the machine. They're recovering beautifully. So as soon as they're recovered and out of my clinic, I'll go ahead and not use this machine anymore. And he said, yeah, fine, whatever. By 1946, Rife closes his own lab. Now, fast forward 5 years. Rife is approached by a guy named John Crane with a C, C-R-A-N-E. And he says, look, I heard you got a bunch of equipment to build things, right? I need machinist things, right? And I'll buy all that equipment off if you want to sell. It's been sitting around for 5 years. Rife is done. He's exhausted. Rife goes, yeah, sure. So then Crane's like, what were you doing with all this stuff, right? So Rife explains it to him. Crane's intrigued. He's like, Jesus, we need to bring all this back. And of course, Rife going, well, if you want to do it, I'll spend your money. So they created a little company together. And it became very apparent that Crane was not really interested in curing anything or patients. He was only interested in the monetary gain that could happen if this became super popular and he could sell a bunch of the machines. And of course, that wasn't going to happen. In 1961, Crane is taken to court because he was discovered to be using the Rife machine on patients and not being a doctor. And so he was charged with medical malpractice and served a little bit of time. Then a guy named Dr. Hubbard, just a random guy in our era in the 70s, discovered all this documentation about this stuff. He's a very young man. And he said, I got to try to find, the microscope. I got to find the machine. I got to see this stuff, right? So he tracked down Crane and ended up documenting a bunch of stuff and finding out about all this. And he was the one that talked to Crane eventually and said, Crane was just a shyster. End of story. So that's the end of the story. In 1971, Rife dies. And this story has been buried. I have seen all of these videos out there that claim that this was a transformational internal microbe that was causing all the illnesses in human beings, but no one was mentioning Royal Raymond Rife as the guy that figured it out and proved it. Yes, he stood on the shoulders of other people, for sure. But this was the dude that figured it out in the modern era. And again, the Pyramid Code series that was all about the rediscovering of what was actually going on in Egypt. And they had the old guys, like 86 years old or whatever, running around showing them everything. Looked like he was, 55. He goes over to the quartz bed and he shows them exactly what was going on. The exact same thing that he described about the quartz bed being a healing bed using frequencies generated from the electricity down below. Pushed in by the pyramids, recharged by this aquifer down below, was how they did it. Well, that's exactly what Rife had figured out. But he also took videos of the little guys that were eating up the human body. And that's all this stuff is doing inside the human body. It is consuming enough of your internals to confuse how things grow. And that's why it grows badly. Well, now, what about all the stuff that's supposed to cause all these illnesses, right? This is the germ infection theory. Well, let's just say that there's some truth to that. Of course, there's truth to that. But it's not germ theory. They have figured out that the K-media that this Kendall guy had created, this food supply, this diet that could be introduced into the human body to, again, either rob these microbes of what they're trying to eat to create different versions of this pleomorphic family group that they have, can create one source of your problems, and giving food to the body is a way to create another version of it. At the same time, there are mechanical ways to simply injure the body. And then it may actually facilitate this sort of K-media type technique. So too many sun rays on your body, perhaps, maybe, I come from Kansas, they call us rednecks. I don't remember all the farmers dying of skin cancer. I just don't. But putting all that skin product, all the skin products. Remember Batman from 1989? They revealed the fact that it wasn't just the one thing that you put on your body. It was the A and the B that would combine on you. Maybe the hair conditioner and shampoo mixed together caused the problem, but tested separately, they're okay. This is A over here and B over here. Perhaps, there are methods of just simply destroying the human body with acids, because acids are the way to modify a lot of this stuff. Now, we found microbes that could live in acids. We found microbes that can live in sulfuric acid, just at the edge of a little plume of volcanic, output that has a sulfuric acid base to it. And they'll find microbes living right there in it. The one off the coast of Hawaii, off the Big Island, is where I heard it. Amazing, right? It's good to have the foundational principles of all this stuff when someone starts telling you something that you have a problem believing. With this information, and you can do some research yourself, you could figure out some of the protocols. You can figure it out. Now, the schematics for this machine are actually out there, okay? It's very interesting. Now, I wouldn't doubt that they have been modified and then pushed out on fake websites. I want to remind you guys of something I was involved in. I've mentioned this several times in episodes, but it's like, 550 episodes ago. When you think about how information comes to you, whether, some of it's really bad and some of it's good, but the misnomer that we have is that, I can just see fake news and I can just see good news. If it comes in a Telegram conspiratorial package, it must be true. If it's on truthsocial.com, it must be true. And if it comes through fake news, it must be false. The truth of the matter is that they're all intertwined, so you can't figure it out. You've been gaslit no matter where you go. You think it's one way or the other, and you're all wrong half the time, right? We are all wrong half the time. I worked at the video game company Electronic Arts from 1993 to 2002. Contractor for the first 6 years, full-time for the last 3 years. By last 3 years, I was running the internet department and engineering this big EA.com thing. And one of the guys that came to me was a dude named Neil Young, who created a video game called Majestic. And it was beyond brilliant, but I didn't realize it was actually a giant psyop on everybody who played the game. But you knew it was a game. We told you it was a game. And so you knew what we were getting into. So it's some pretty amazing information. The reason why I got involved was that he came to us and he said, look, there's an element to my game that needs lots of websites. And we're totally intrigued. And the way the game started out was just like X-Files. It was very alien-based. Aliens are all over the world and they're in various agencies and things. I don't think they were at the reptile level. They were more great alien theory. But he says, we got this game that you sign up to through the web, and we get your phone number, fax machine if you got one, email address, and we start sending things to you like you're a secret agent. And we don't stop. And they'll actually call your telephone and fake people talk to you, yell and scream like bloody murder. But our group, and I personally got involved. I was way at this director level, but it was such a different species of requirement from our department. I need to figure out a way to button up the costs. So I went down and met with him. He and I went to England one time too. And he's gigantic now. He used to run Zynga, and I don't know if maybe he still runs that, but he's huge. He's a huge guy. You can look him up on the net. And he kind of was a nobody when I first met him. It was very interesting. He's highly intelligent. He's from England originally. But we created these websites, which were fake companies. Dozens and dozens and dozens. And we made them look stupid. We made them look like they're abandoned companies, abandoned websites. Some of them still functioning, some of them not. Bought hundreds and hundreds of domains to make this thing happen, as I understand it. And so we created a disinformation thing so that you could actually get a little lead from a voicemail, from a fax, from an email, and go out and search on it, and you would find things in the search engines out there, making you believe this was real. It was entertainment. Again, we were very forthcoming about this. The problem with the product was that apparently one of the box covers that we had released just before 9/11 was a plane going at the World Trade Centers. The box gets pulled because it's obviously unsavory for the times, and the game just tanks. But the experiment was already finished, wasn't it? What ends up happening to Rife is what happens to everyone who tries to disturb science. Some of the quickest paradigm shifts in history, is 100 years. You got guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson who got their degrees 40 years ago, and they read a piece of paper, they host Cosmos, they get a few producer notes, and they keep upgrading their technology and their brain to like just sort of the Best Buy version of all of it. They get to sit on, Joe Rogan shows and take pisses on people like Nikola Tesla. Neil deGrasse Tyson hasn't invented anything that you use in your house, but he'll take his little weak personality and try to usurp the geniuses of the world. That's what nerds do. They want to be important. And when you give them a television show and movies, right? Oh man, it just gets worse and worse and worse. That is, as a metaphorical explanation, those are claws that are dug into bad science. Back in the day, it was simply prestige and money. We worked at Cambridge University, Oxford University. Oh, you're going to displace these guys? In terms of the country's sort of grand trophy, from the royal families all the way down to these guys, or down to the people, you should say, probably, they worship this mezzanine of people closest to royalty, which were the people that said how the world worked. What do you think the Masons were? People who had stood on their own shoulders for centuries, for millennia. They knew how to use divining rods to find the aquifers down below, which led up a bunch of burpy plasma that moved the rods. If you watch the Cinemax show, The Nick, K-N-I-C-K, which stands for the Nickelodeon Hospital in New York City, set in 1900, by the second season, they overtly tell you in the narration of these characters that the eugenics organizations were starting to build up steam. They knew it could never be communicated to the public, blatantly. We want to get rid of certain races. We want to get certain people. Anyone who's handicapped, they want to get rid of them because they're just a drain on society, right? Thank God we have technology that might even change their mind nowadays. But they were just brutal. And so they knew they had to hide themselves inside these medical paradigms to get the job done. Old people, you lived your life. If you didn't get the life you wanted, well, shame on you. But you are now draining society. You're the four grandparents in, Willy Wonka's chocolate factory taking care of Charlie Bucket. You are no longer useful. See you later. Obviously, that isn't true. The wisdom within some of those people is priceless. And because they keep trying to re-engineer society to be morons, they really don't want any wisdom that is encapsulated inside an old mind to be smuggled into the future and dropped off at a future date to undo what they're trying to do. We know that Nikola Tesla usually gets into people's lives, if you ever to learn his name, probably by your mid-30s. If you get to learn about Nikola Tesla any year earlier than your 30th birthday, and you dive into what he did, you're one of the luckiest human beings in the modern era. But Royal Raymond Rife is your next target to figure out how the human body works. This story, I think, is utterly fascinating. The fact that no one's made this story is interesting. If you look up Royal Raymond Rife inside Wikipedia, I want to show you how they do what they do. There is a section at the bottom of the page that talks about health fraud. Pay attention to what you're reading. This is unfucking believable, all right? But it's so funny how they do it. Wikipedia at some point needs to be part of the Nuremberg trials. I'm just telling you. Everyone who's ever worked for those motherfuckers. Just telling you. Okay? What they did was they went off and found a book that was written, I believe, in the 90s, but way after Rife was dead. Someone wrote a book claiming, that this machine did what it did and yada, yada, yada. They then based the debunking of Rife on this book, which could have been written by them. Published the book full of errors, full of claims, misguided, misdirecting all the science, maybe even some of the schematics in the book. You build that thing, it's not going to work. And then say, hey, we found out this guy was a fraud because this other guy wrote a book about him 20 years after he's dead, almost to the year if I remember right, and look how wrong this is. That's supposed to be good, validated information. But the videos that he recorded of all these beings exploding inside the Rife microscope, well, that's not admissible evidence. It makes complete and utter sense that you could vibrate something at its resonance and blow it away. Electron microscopes, well, if they don't start shooting movies, well, then we know why they don't want you to see movies, because they can show you a little crumb of something and tell you it's one thing, and it's not even a living being. And they could show you a living being and make you feel like it's a crumb. Remember what I told you, that I discovered that when you go to a university or any type of science institution with electron microscope, at least in the United States of America, as I've been told several times, you have to register what you're looking for in the electron microscope. And at any point in time, some invisible government body above you, of which that report escalates to before you get in line, because it's always a backlog. Unless you're very, very lucky, there's always a backlog to get access to the microscope. They can shut you down and say, no, you're not allowed to look at that. Wow. So if you get close to the source of what Rife was looking at, you want to prove any of this theory, of this pleomorphic stuff, they can shut you down. But even if you could use an electron microscope, if it can't take a movie, which I don't know any that can, maybe there is one out there, I don't know. But I guarantee you start trying to look at this sub-micron stuff exactly the way Rife was looking at it, and you want to create a frequency to obliterate them, it's not debatable science that you could do this. It's not. If you think you can't resonate a bacteria, sub-micron bacteria, out of existence, even a bacteria out of existence, then your grasp of science is negligible, and your opinion being contributed to the overall psyche of this whole event should be subtracted, disallowed. Okay? So the K medium, again, could be used as a weapon. With 100 billion hertz technology, which is Class C 5G towers, I think it's very conceivable that this stuff could be engineered all over your body. I'm going to just digress for 1 second. I was having lunch with a friend of mine, and we're talking about how coffee shops, all in Southern California especially, have had this insane increase in customers. Like beyond, like lines out the door, and especially anyone who builds one that's not Starbucks, right? Everyone's tired of that acidic coffee, right? That super non-alkaline coffee that you're drinking, right? What a joke. And we're thinking, like, why is this that all day long these coffee shops are just plastered with customers? And then, of course, my memory kicks in. It's like I've read articles that basically say 5G is making everybody really tired. Why would that be? Well, what makes you tired? Usually it's your internal temperature going up makes you a little bit tired. What would make your body start exuding more calorie energy, hence thermal radiation inside your body? Stuff's moving, that's why. Your immune system's moving. Now, forget everybody who got the drink. If you have something, and believe me, there's something in the drink, okay? There's probably active K-media ingredients in the drink, okay? But if your body's being attacked like crazy, and it's trying to heal itself constantly, but just ever so slightly that you don't end up in a hospital with something until one of your organs pops. One of your clusters of cells starts getting malignant, starts creating a cancer of some sort. And by the way, when you research Rife, the escalation in cancer in human beings starts to become part of the documentation that they tracked. They quote the statistics over the course of like 40 years and say, oh my God, it's out of control. We knew what it was in the 30s and 20s, and now by the 70s, when Nixon declares this war on cancer, which was just a couple months after Rife died, skyrockets, right? GMO introduced into your food, all this other stuff. But imagine 5G, which is also supposed to make you feel dehydrated. It's blasting out your water that's in your epidermis, and so your body sends more water to your skin, and it blasts it out, and you send more body. So, of course, you're going to be drained of your water. It's basically making you evaporate at a microscopic level, potentially. But if your body's constantly getting this regimen, this beam, that may be killing off the good stuff and leaving back the bad stuff, never know, right? I've been extremely hesitant to attach these two things together, 5G and illness, because, there's all the theories about 1918 is when they started the radios all around the world, and everywhere they did that, they had a huge outbreak of the Spanish flu. Blamed it on some farm in Kansas. What a fucking hilarious thing, right? Remember, stress malnutrition also creates the problem of influenza. That must be the pleomorphic configuration that creates what we know as flu. We sent a bunch of soldiers over to Europe in 1917, and basically what it was just a couple levels maybe over what slave ships were like. Soldiers standing in salt water, excreting all of their bodily fluids in a way to get into this war for the first time. And then all of a sudden we land in Spain, and then boom, it happens there. But they were talking about happening in trench warfare and leaking into the public. Because remember, Spain wasn't in the war, and they had journalists that weren't being as controlled. That's never going to happen again. They're all controlled, right? But anyway, it's food for thought. Blew my mind. Go do some research. I would say go to Wikipedia last, okay? But BitChute had some great videos on it. I don't know if Rumble has them. We'll see. I wouldn't go to YouTube. If you search in any search engine out there, because no one is publishing anything on this guy's behalf, you will find one medical website after another, WebMD, all these medical websites who just tear this apart. But once you see the videos yourself, you'll be utterly blown away. I'll try to put some in this video. Hopefully it doesn't get, copyright striked. But he was a medical Tesla. The good thing is he had a lot of other medical Teslas with him, helping him prove out his concept. So that's just a beautiful thing. Anyway, let me know what you think. Hope you feel me on this. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. It has everything you'd ever want up there. Just remember, we're putting new thumbnails on a lot of the most popular videos. That's just going to continue. I don't know if I'll ever get them all converted, but maybe. Might take 2 or 3 years to get 700 thumbnails done. I'm doing 20 at a time, and it just takes time to find the right one. So I want to put a special thanks out to Kinda for submitting a ton of beautiful images for these monoliths. She's really just taken a lot of burden off my back, and she's contributing to some of the beautiful thumbnails you're seeing, at least that image in the monolith. So thank you so much. For those of you who come in through Patreon and PayPal, thank you so much. We've had a lot of activity recently, so I really appreciate it. Just remember, when you come in through PayPal, I don't get any of your reply information. So if you ask me questions and stuff in that format, I can't get back to you, because unless you put your email in the comment, I'm not going to be able to say thank you so much. So for all of you who did, thank you so much. We've had a couple recently. On Patreon, you get the episodes before everyone else, at least the audio for sure. And you get MK Ultra Radio, my old show, and just chats between the two of us that I send out to the whole group. And again, if you hit a certain level of donation, we can do a one-on-one together. I've had just nothing but amazing videos with everyone. I've made permanent friends for life. So to all of you, thank you so much. And if you made it to the end, I appreciate you. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.